I want to take some time to reflect with you on this great movie, Gravity. Uh, Question right off the bat. I want to mention it now so I don't forget about it. Why the title of the movie? Uh, what sort of force is at play here that you can't escape from, right? And how can you use it to your advantage? Gravity is what keeps the orbits happening. Gravity is the reason the International Space Station can stay orbiting Earth. It has to be attracted to it and moving away from it at the same time to create this circular falling. Very useful image to think of orbit is to think of a a mountain on Earth. So you have Earth and you have this mountain. You put a little cannon up there and it shoots a cannonball. And as it shoots the cannonball from the top of the mountain, the cannonball shoots out and then falls to the earth. Well, what if you could shoot it with enough powder and speed so that as it shoots out from the cannon and it falls towards the earth, it keeps on missing the earth because it has moved too far into the earth's horizon. So as it falls towards the earth, it manages to just miss the earth because of the earth's curve. And so the ball keeps on falling, trying to hit the earth, and you have orbit. So, it's the force that is propelling all the motion in this movie, the danger and the rescue, as the space junk keeps on cycling and destroying um, the satellites and the space station, and the other uh, foreign entity, structures are being pulled down, and they are going to be destroyed by gravity. But how does life arise from that? And at the end, you do have this picture of someone rising from the primordial conditions of Earth, a swamp, the slime, the dragonflies, the sand, as a fish comes out to become a land animal in the evolutionary scheme. So you have this person emerging to new birth. There are imagery of the womb here. You can see her at one point as she floats, uh, oxygen deprived, and as she pulls off her suit and floats in that chamber, it turns into a picture of the womb with the umbilical cord. So you are being prepared to examine this as a birthing story, if you will. All right. There's death involved as well. I mean, obviously, much of the movie is her trying to avoid death, and her two, well, one of her shipmates has certainly died. The other one has also died, but reappears. Right. Um, these themes can be explaining gravity. I prefer to think so because there is another meaning of the word, meaning the seriousness of a situation, the gravitas, if you will, and that may be a play in play also. There are very grave situations that uh, the main character faces concerning, for example, the death of her daughter, and that may speak to the gravity of life, right? The gravity of loss, the seriousness of it. Well, anyway, I want to present this movie to you, especially how we're using it in the place of in our program as a secular salvation story. All right. So some of the presuppositions we're working with is that you are made in the image of God, and because of that, there are certain things that we're just going to take for granted. One, you have an incredible mind that loves language. You might not be into learning foreign language, but you are a language driven person. I mean, you picked this up when you were two, and you know all about predication. That is displacement and predication. Okay, let's just think about that for a little bit. You know how to take the state of affairs you consider your reality, and you know how to represent it in terms of symbols. You're a symbol using person, which means displacement, because you can talk about your room while you're driving in your car to another place. So you displace the concept. You don't have to be in your room to talk about it, which gives rise to memory. And memory, because it takes you out of the present, the now, can be the same function that allows you to imagine the future, right? It's all displacement. That's what language does to you, and you were created this way. You were asked to name things from the beginning. You were asked to be very, very involved with the things of this earth, the beauty of this earth, nature. Your job, created in God's image, was to be a gardener, right? So you nourish, you create, you protect, and you grow. This is what parents do with their children. This is what many, many people do with their artwork, their books, their clothes. We can get superficial here. Now, what I mean when I say secular version of this is that people that do not recognize this or believe it or buy into it, if you will, from my vision, from my perspective, they are still going to be involved in this image-bearing set of activities. I call this the God echo. They might not recognize it, but they are creating and curating and nourishing. Some, of course, have fallen far from this and are the antithesis of it, but I believe that in the main, people do enjoy creating. People do enjoy communicating. People do enjoy community, right? And all of these things are part of being in the image of God. And you were meant to recognize the beauty of life and the utter majesty of it, if you will. To fight against the notion that it's a mechanical anomaly. Consciousnesses. Life itself might be a biological anomaly. In fact, it's extremely hard to define biologically, but we do seem to just know that life exists on Earth and that you are partaking in life. Now, to have life and to have selfhood are different things. There are plenty of things that have life that we don't believe have selfhood. And if you have selfhood, then you have life. So, it's not necessarily a biconditional thing. If you have life, you may or may not have selfhood. But if you have selfhood, you definitely have life. So this is what it is to be human. And to fight against things like loss, absurd loss, right? Why did the makers of the story create the death of the child that way, right? Ryan is there, the character, and she tells Matt, her fellow astronaut, that her child died playing tag, fell, hit her head, and that was it, right? How absurd is that? So there is a sense where she rejects that. If she can't actually reject it, she is not going to be happily accepting it as part of her life. All right. And so that has created great sadness and disconnection in her, that something as beautiful as her daughter can be taken away, it can perish in this way, in this absurd way. And there is this notion of absurdity at play with the danger involved in the movie. The Russians, in seeking to destroy and protect their intelligent assets, right? They shoot down their own spy satellite that is malfunctioning, and in doing that, they destroy everything that their intelligent activities were trying to preserve. This is it's absurd. So there is a sense where someone created in the image of God wants eternal goodness, wants loves to be preserved, wants joy to remain forever. We fight for that. And when it seems hopeless and impossible, we shut down. So given that, I want to call this a salvation story, because the humans in this movie are fighting for survival, and one of them finds a way not only to physically just survive, but to be psychologically reborn. She has learned how to deal with trauma, right? And I think that this movie is presenting this. Of course, on the surface, it's the level of a space adventure, right? But I believe that it has layers, and underneath the surface story is another story, the story of how to deal with trauma in your life, okay? And in this way, I want to have this movie sort of be part of two notions. One is the notion of, if you are not going to believe in the coming of Jesus Christ, of God in as man, to propitiate, right, to take care of humans' broken relationship with God by paying for their sins, which is Jesus's, according to Western Christianity, right? Jesus's act on the cross was an act of propitiation. It had meaning for redemption, which allows the humans to now reconnect to their Creator without the fear of absolute punishment that the sin and the fallenness of the world mandates. Someone has taken care of that. So now, through Christ, you can approach God the Father and have a relationship again as a son or a daughter. Okay? That's why you can now approach the throne in boldness, talk to God, pray to God, expect God to work in your life, look for God, become a child of God, walk towards God, develop the characteristics of God, i.e. the fruits of the Spirit. You now have a whole different destiny, right? And this is the traditional Christian salvation story. But for a world that may not be willing to accept that literally, right? Because they are still made in the image of God, they want salvation. They want some sort of salvation. They recognize that there is brokenness and loss and deterioration and death, and they want to be saved from it. So they will create a salvation story, right? And it can take different ways. It can look different. It can take different figures on it. And we'll examine some of these different forms in different movies. But this one is presenting it in a very interesting way. Okay, so let's talk about that a little bit. But I also want us to use this movie to talk about some core ideas of existentialism. Okay, so existentialism is a sort of a broad term covering a whole collection of beliefs and attitudes towards life. But a common principle for an existentialist philosophy is that it is not going to be concerned about some of the older questions of philosophy in terms of what are substances, what is cause and effect, what does it mean to be a mind in a material body? How do you prove God's existence? The existentialist is going to be much more concerned about how to understand the way it feels to be human. Okay, the way that life can be lived in a fulfilling way. So you realize someone like Kant can figure out how an external world can exist if we can never access it, right? And he has a whole theory talking about the noumena, the thing in itself, and how we have to sort of impose a form on it given the way our mind is created. So we have these categories of reshaping the noumena so that we can have a sensory experience that tells us where the room is, where the table is, where the door is. And you might say, well, how does that help me with the feelings I have concerning my life, the anxiety I might be feeling, the notion of who am I? The very real question is life worth living? Why not suicide? These are the questions that existentialism seeks to consider as the important questions. What does it really mean to be human? And if you want to maybe see this from another angle, let's say you have someone that is, a deep thinker and goes into their office or their study and solves problems, right? And then let's say a bell rings or something, and then they leave that study and they go and have their regular life with their family, with their friends, with the community. And let's say that as they live their regular life, they have issues. They have broken relationships. They are bored. They they have trouble controlling their emotions. Maybe they're being challenged with addictions. Or sometimes they could have very pleasant experiences, right? But this is them living life. You see what I'm saying? And then the next day, for maybe 9 o'clock in the morning. They go back into the study and they solve these abstract problems. Now, what if they actually came up with some really great solutions? Well, the question is, come 5 o'clock, when they leave that room, did they leave the solutions in the room? Like, in other words, were they able to stop thinking about it and come out and enjoy life, have a great meal, have some fun, go play around the golf? If you can actually leave the, you know, the act of cognition, the intellectual survey, the problem solving, if you can leave it and then go have another life that you just enjoy and relax, that is not an existential life. For the existentialist, the notion is the problems that are really important, you'll never be able to disassociate with them. They go with you wherever you go. And so it's only if you have sedated yourself very heavily with superficial goals or an extremely heavy workload so that you don't have to think about it, or you've just constantly trained yourself not to think about it by distracting yourself with education or entertainment or work or relationships. These questions of where did I come from? Why am I here? Where am I going? Who am I? How do I live? How do I live? How do I be? These questions are the real questions for an existentialist. Okay, now if you're coming from the notion that in fact you were not divinely created, because some existentialists do believe that you were created by God. Kierkegaard, the very first one that really nailed down some of these concepts for us, truly did believe in God. So it's not necessarily a godless thing. It can have different forms to it, but in our modern era, Western era, there is a very strong temptation to let your flow of ideas begin with the notion that matter is all there is. And if matter is all there is, you have a couple very deep contradictions. But the thing is to deal with, but even more so than believing mind only is, but let's not get into that. There is this notion of, well, I don't necessarily have a purpose. I'm here as an evolutionary accident, if you will. Not even an accident in the old technical sense, just an evolutionary happening. That's what I am. And because of some quirk somewhere down the line, I developed consciousness. It may or may not help me develop as a biological being, but it's here, and it's not coming from some divine plan. That's what the materialist existentialist is going to say. Okay, so one basic principle is existence comes first, and then you have to create your essence. So there's a moment where you have to actually choose: are you going to live or not? And if you're going to live, what kind of person are you going to be? What are you going to pursue? But to get to that point, right, the existentialist is going to say you need to get to that point the right way, with really feeling the power of the question and really being concerned about the answer. Okay, it's like doing math. You can look at a math problem and you're lost at sea, and then you just guess the number. Let's say you just guess a number, and lo and behold, you are right. That's the right number, right? You looked at the math problem and you got the right answer, right? I think we would all say, you're lucky, it's not going to hold, you don't know math. You still don't know. You don't even know that you don't know. Now, that's the worst position to be in, but the existentialist would say, you have to reach this moment of crisis and decision the right way. You can't just, one day wake up and say, well, I'm going to be X, Y, or Z, and not have it come from a world of pain because of angst and anxiety. So the way you reach this moment, right, is to have a whole long, it could be a long process or a short process, but a process of alienation, okay, where you begin to sense that you are alone in the world, that it's not just that, you are you and no one else is you and you are unique in this. It is that, in fact, no one cares about you. And the people that do care about you may care about you for other reasons than for who you are. And the people that really care about you tend to die before you do. And you might be left alone in this world. And not only that, the things that you value and love seem to lose their value and luster, appeal to you. It could be death. It could be the child that dies. It could be all sorts of things. But there is a growing sense of deep dissatisfaction. Very famous writer, one of my favorites, American writer, David Foster Wallace, committed suicide. And I believe he felt this. And the story goes that as he was a young child, well, it's more than a story. It's in in the biography. But he told his mom and dad, I don't want life. I never asked for it. Why didn't I get a choice? It's too hard. So there's a sense where life begins to get too hard, right? And at that point, you have this alienation and this angst that comes in. And it's not just anxiety because you got too much stuff to do. It's anxiety because you're beginning to really seriously consider that nothing matters. Nothing matters. And if nothing matters because of the way things are always going to die or change, or, I mean, you can even hyperextend it to say, well, 100 years from now, this is all okay. But if you really take that seriously and you allow it to affect your value system, right, all of a sudden, nothing matters. You don't have heaven to look forward to. You don't have some divine in your life moving you forward to your created ends. So there's a sense where it's like, well, why don't we commit suicide now? And one of the great existentialist philosophers said, well, that is the main question. I think it was Camus, but Camus. Why not suicide? And I feel like because we are created in the image of God, we have a lot of tension with this notion of suicide. Sadly, some people overcome that tension, but most of us can conceptually understand it, but we will never do it. So there's this notion of, no, let's fight for salvation. Let's fight to find something worth living for, right? Well, you have this alienation and this anxiety that you can manifest by panicking, or you can manifest by closing down, okay? And obviously you can be competent on maybe your job or the skill sets that you learn that are not existentially driven, like playing the piano or fixing a car. And so you have an astronaut in space. How alienated can you get? Losing communication with Houston, trying to fix something, a computer that she's been trained to fix, and yet filled with sadness and a sort of a, what's the point of life demeanor, okay? Now, as the crisis moment hits in the movie, right, the death of one of the astronauts happens, and Matt and Ryan are left alone, and they begin to sort of struggle for survival. And Matt is really the driving force here. Matt seems to have it together, right? And so, finally, Ryan does get to another, the Russian station, right? And is able to at least enter and breathe again, right? But you're learning some stuff about her as the movie progresses, and the loss of her child has caused her to just say, "Hey, when I'm done with work, I just want to drive. I don't care what's on the radio, as long as they're not talking. I just want to drive." So as she continues to have to confront this, right? The notion is, do you want to live or not? And because the moment is right for her, as it is for the path of conversion, if you will, the path of, now the existentialist movement will call it authenticity. So you have alienation, angst, and then that leads you towards, if things pan out the correct way, not suicide, but authenticity. And authenticity is you grappling with this notion of choice, and you taking responsibility of making the choice for life, and then committing to it. And so as she shuts down right now, really quickly, I want you to notice, or maybe it's too late, but maybe you can look back and consider the items that were displayed in these cockpits and in the stations. You have the card of the icon, the Catholic icon, you have Orthodox Russian Catholic, you have the Buddha, you have chess, which is, I think, representing the mindset of intellectual, materialist Western worldview. Now, you do have other things too. I mean, obviously, you have fire extinguisher that she uses that's floating around. You have a pen and a paper, but there are pieces there that begin to suggest that this is a global problem, and that the religions of the world can help if you were to embrace one of them, just as a guide for life. You don't have to necessarily believe in the afterlife and in God, but it might give you a community and a path to follow, right? And as you know, they're in the cockpits there where the pilot is. The pilot is the one who's directing, the path. So that could be a sense where that could help. Once you hit this moment of you got to choose: are you going to live or die? If you're going to live, what's going to give you direction? Intelligence, education, a religion. What's it going to be? And so at that point, as far as existentialism goes, and again, this movie kind of overlaps the secular salvation story that I want to look at, and also overlaps this notion of existentialism. I don't want to say they're the same thing. I just want to say that this movie is very handy because it kind of introduces people to both concepts. And there is a sense where there can be a salvation story in existentialism. If you choose not to commit suicide and you decide on something, that's why Matt, the George Clooney character, comes back as a vision and tells her, do you want to go home or not? You want to live or die? What do you want? I get it, right? It's quiet up here. It's nice. Make up your mind, right? So she has this moment of decision, right? And for the existentialist, then what follows next is then finding a path of life. And sometimes it could be artificial. You have to develop a project, and then you can commit yourself to the project, and it can carry you out to the end of your days. The bigger the project, the better, because then you will never accomplish it, and you'll never have this moment of decision again. But you at least learn how to deal with this notion of, okay, it's meaningless, but I'm going to choose life, and I'm going to bring essence and value to it. I'm going to create it just so that I can live out and not do suicide. That's the existential, right? Here, though, the movie makes a very interesting break when Matt, the astronaut that had to flow down into space, comes back as Ryan is dying in the cockpit because she turns down the oxygen, right? He bangs on the door. He opens the door, comes in. You realize this is a very strong hallucination for her because obviously as he opens the door, all the air should be escaping, and he's able to come in, and she's able to not, be dead. So, but he's very convincing, right? And he tells her directions of how to get the thing moving and forces her to make the moment of decision. Okay. But it is this moment that the movie takes an interesting turn, because when Ryan wakes up from her oxygen deprived, blackout, she is actually convinced that Matt has spoken to her as a supernatural being, which gives her hope, right? She says, look, find my daughter. Tell her I found that red shoes he was so worried about, that it's all okay, and that mommy loves her. Mommy's, there's this sense where my daughter's not gone. Matt died and he came back. I was allowed communication across this, what I thought was an impenetrable divide, or just the absolute end, nothing beyond. There is something beyond. There is an afterlife. People do survive their death, and we can communicate with each other, which is really the battery, the driving force of spiritualism in America. American spiritualism, the notion that you can talk to the spirits, not just someone saying, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual, and they mean I don't go to church, but I do pray and worship God. No, spiritism is, I believe that you can talk to the dead, that they exist as a person, they don't lose their identity, and through mediums or other things you can discuss and talk with them. Whew, the hope that fills this up. So another movie that really looks at this, right, is Magic in the Moonlight. Magic in the Moonlight and Gravity kind of go together for this at this point. She's filled with hope, right? She's filled with new energy, and she solves the problem of how to get to the Chinese station, how to turn it around, how to enter the Earth's surface, how to be reborn. There's a rebirth, all right? So the movie is not through and through an existentialist movie, because I believe that it was set up to talk about an event that happens in one's life where it allows them to truly believe that something beyond exists, If you grow up in a Christian household, this belief is yours, and it's a very strong belief. This is what I do believe. This is what I mean. This is what I think the verse means that says, train up a child in the way they should go, and when they are old, they will not depart from it. Because plenty times, older adults changed the way of life that they had as they were children, okay? But if you believe in the hereafter, you believe in God as a child, and you live your life this way, that belief is so ingrained, it's so natural. How can it not be true? So for you right now, I believe it's true on its own, but well, I did. I grew up as a kid too, believing in God. Why would I stop believing now? It makes so much sense that there is a God. So that's the point of this movie. The movie delivers real hope to a modern audience that might not be ready to accept existentialism on their own terms. The existentialism says you make your choice, and then you abide by that choice, and you bring the project. You have to create it. You have to commit to it. Ryan here in the movie has an experience given to her that she believes is not her creation, but in fact sort of a gift, sort of a life-saving experience, a Damascus Road experience. Okay, so the Damascus Road experience refers to Paul on the road to Damascus, when Christ appears to him in a blinding light and does something that Paul cannot ignore, and Paul cannot think that somehow he did, right? Paul met somebody, and Ryan in that cockpit believes she met somebody. She met Matt. She knows Matt's dead, but here's Matt. Tells her how to start it, and allows her to say, I'll see my daughter again. But until I get there, Matt, you tell her. And she's filled with this hope. Now, the beautiful thing about this movie is it never oversimplifies something, because it presents the scene in what I call double coding. Double coding means, for me, right, this is my term, it means that the situation is such that if you have a mind that is looking for God and can see God, you're going to see it there. If you have a mind that's looking for materialism, you're going to see it there as well and say, well, the person is mistaken, because someone might say, that just happened in her blackout. That was a result of being oxygen deprived. That's just her mind hallucinating. That's not a real visitation, right? Well, the question for the movie here is, well, what does she believe? She believes it is a real visitation, right? Fills her with hope, changes everything, helps her want to survive. Her mind clicks into gear, figures out the solution, and she's reborn. Okay, so this is a secular salvation story, I believe, but it's one that hinges on this notion of somehow having an experience with the other side, that you genuinely believe is an experience with the other side. And it is also showing that the path of crisis and of this moment of conversion also follows the existentialist path very carefully, which suggests to me a deeper principle that existentialism, if you can understand it, read about it, get a little better versed in it, is really the default response somebody made in the image of God is going to have when they are cut off from their Creator and no longer truly believe in the things they were made to believe in, right? They cannot not be sad, and they'll deal with that in different ways: medication, addiction, overwork, all sorts of stuff. Very creative how we deal with this, self-medicate. But I do believe that the process of the existentialist conversion is actually a very widespread. It's sort of the default process for people that are looking for a God that they believe can no longer be found, and then they may believe that there is no God. So, but if you are made in the image of God and you believe there is no God, I believe that the existentialist path is something you're on automatically. So it may be worth really looking into this so that you can learn more about people. All right. And so we do study philosophy in these programs, but we don't study it academically or, if you study it historically, it's a slow, very profitable, but you have to be ultra committed, and we're talking maybe 5 years, right? But there are issues in philosophy that are very worth looking into, because they're really quite at play in today's culture, and I believe existentialism is one of them. So I just wanted you to think about these things, all right? It's a very good movie to have this conversation with, and I want to thank you for watching the video. No, this is a time commitment. You got to sit down, and I could very easily imagine, a point where it's like, really, I really don't want to watch another video, but you did, and you got to this point, and I understand that it's my duty to try to always give you something that creates interest, maintains it, rewards it, in the sense of trying to give you something to think about, trying to give you something that grows, that helps you grow, right? As a person that is trying to become in charge of your own education, and that's again a heartbeat of Ravenburn, and the programs we're doing here is not for you to sit passively and allow us to give you an education, but for allow us to start modeling for you so that you can be in charge of your education and start learning how to be an educator for yourself. And one of the things that you need to do now is, I told you existentialism is important, so why don't you ask AI all about it and see if you can try to get a general notion, try to see if I was right or wrong, do something, right, to help you take another step in your growth here. Don't wait for another video. You go ask AI about existentialism and learn a little bit more, and test me to see if this is really something you need to learn about people, okay? All right, there's a challenge for you. Thanks again for watching. I appreciate it.